let's talk about what it's going to take for reform to win, because this is starting to get a little bit interesting now. This was by far the most boring election of my lifetime up until about a week ago, and it is now the most interesting election of my lifetime. So, first thing to say is, by all means, if you haven't ordered yet, we are closing the pre-order period for the magazine this week. So if you want to get a first edition, head over to lotusleaders.com and do that now. Right now, if you want to play along at home, you want to go to this website, Electoral Calculus, where basically you can sort of plug in whatever numbers you like, and you can find out what's going to happen. But we're going to be talking about some of this, so I'll give you an opportunity to load that up if you wanted to do that. Let's start off with a little bit of poll tracking, which the Telegraph have helpfully provided for us here, so we can just sort of get a sense of the scale of how badly things are or how well things are going, but badly, of course, if you are Conservative. So this is the general sort of poll trackers. Now, as you can see, both the two main parties, and it was really only the two main parties there, were sort of level pegging before we decided to lock down the world over a scare.
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I wanted to let you know that we've introduced a feature on the website that allows you to purchase individual videos. So if you go over to lotusleaders.com and see a piece of premium content that you really want to watch, you can pay for it, and it is yours forever.
Is this not June 2021 after the lockdowns?
Yeah, that's as far as it goes back. But basically, they had been level pegging until then. And as you can see, the fear campaign, which the Tories decided to lean into, gave them that sort of short-term bump. But by what's this? This is end of 21. People were getting a bit fed up with it. The fear mongering was no longer working. And basically, since then, the Tories have been well behind, and it's only accelerated ever since then. And you've got this sort of irredeemable gap in the middle. A couple of things I'll also point out on the polling tracking. That's people's views on immigration. Any chance we can get this in not dark mode, because we can't see the key now, but. There we go. So, as you can see, people who think that immigration is doing damage to the UK, overall, it is the view now. Immigration has become the main issue for this election, strongly amongst Tory voters. Only Labour voters still think that immigration is a good thing. Not sure why.
Because they're immigrants, probably. I mean,
well, that could be it. Although actually,
immigrants largely vote Labour. In fact, the vast majority of immigrant groups vote Labour for at least the first generation, right? In Muslim communities, it's like 99% Labour.
Although I would say easily the most anti-immigration and probably racist people I know are people who are first-generation immigrants who came here sort of 20, 30 years ago.
They like kicking the ladder out underneath them, don't they? It's funny, isn't it?
Yes, so immigration is the major issue. Right, now let's look at polling by age, because it's worth making this point as well. So Labour are dominant amongst the younger people, the sort of 18 to 24s. I mean, there's just a sort of unassailable gap there. If you go into the 25 by 49s, these people were somewhat affected by the fear period that we had around here, and it sort of improved the Tories' chances. So you can see why they lent into Project COVID fear so heavily, but it never sort of permeated through to an actual commanding position. 50 to 60, they actually had a lead amongst these people during the Project COVID fear, although that has since dropped away. But the defining feature of the Tory strategy is this: if you look at the over 65s, now for the over 65, that's basically all they've got. It's 65-year-olds. So I mean, that is why you're seeing what looks to be like completely insane Tory messaging around this election, which is, let's do conscription. Mm-hmm. Let's send the young people off to fight in that Ukraine war that you've been sitting there watching on the news every night.
Well, it's not a serious policy proposal, is it? It's just sort of boomer bait. It's
exactly that
for the boomers.
Yeah. That's the group you love so much, and talking about in Brokenomics.
Well, it may have come up in Brokenomics once or twice, but the conscription policy, which to be fair isn't mainly conscription, is it? I mean, mainly it's just free workers for the NHS. Mm-hmm. So it's
state slavery,
and delivering things to old people. Mm-hmm. Now that policy, it's something like 2/3 don't like it, but the third that do like it are all 65 plus.
That's as explicit as you can possibly get. Of the Tories admitting we've given up on the young and the middle age, we're just going for the old because at least we know they're likely to vote for us.
Well, I think it's worse than that. I think what they're doing is effectively torching their long-term viability as a party in order to try and lock up, to stop that bleed that you're seeing there in the only group that still votes for them, which is the over 65s. Because not only have you got conscription, which, like I say, is mainly just slave labour for the NHS and delivering things to old people, as if, presumably they don't have Amazon or something. But also there's, of course, the quad lock that they've now put on pensions. Now, nobody under 65 is going to give that policy any credence whatsoever, because everybody under 65 understands perfectly well that they're not going to get a pension. But the people who are 65 now, you might stretch out for a few more years where they can have their sort of quad-locked pensions and their slave labour. So, so that's basically why the Tory policy in this election campaign looks so mad. It's because they're torching it just to shore up the over 65 vote. Polling by country, I'm not sure London is a country. Maybe it should be. Actually, let's statehood for London. Two-state solution. The rest of us in London. I quite like that.
All right, I can live with that.
Yeah, London, of course, there's no meaningful reform presence there. Tories have always done low there. The rest of the South, that's the only area where the Tories still have a reasonable showing, even though it's behind. And as you can see, Reform are shooting up there. But in places like the North, again, some growth. In fact, look, in the North, Reform are level pegging with the Tories now. Scotland, well, they've got that Scottish National Party, which appears to be not particularly Scottish, not particularly national. It's not even fun, so you can't call it a party.
It's like the scandal party at the minute. I mean, everything they do is going wrong.
Yeah.
Like, all of their sort of foundational leaders have been kicked out of the party for various reasons. Nicola Sturgeon's under investigation, I believe, for fraud, as is her husband.
And just think of how much she risked and for what reason. She sort of lost her position for the scandal that erupted after. I mean, that was the uproar. There were other reasons, but you remember when with the Isla Bryson affair.
I mean, she gets to spend more time with the cats or whatever it is that she's into. But I mean, even there, look, the SNP have fallen behind Labour, which is quite remarkable. Let's have a look at England as a whole, just for the fun. Oh, there you go. Yeah, strong showing there, and Reform are heading up to that sort of Tory level.
Well, the Tories are on decline, aren't they? So even amongst their sort of chosen demographic, which is, pensioners, they're still going down and losing people to Reform. So even though they've cornered this demographic and sort of scorned everyone else, which isn't going to help them in the long term, as you say, even amongst that target constituency, they're still going down.
Yes.
So the damage is being done as time goes on.
Thus the policy is to try and shore them up. Interestingly, we don't have a huge difference between the sexes, because you often see those sort of charts in the US of how the Democrat vote is heavily female skewed. There's a bit of that going on, but that seems to be less of an issue here. Which is broadly the same picture. Although Reform does much better with men than it does with women. Women tend to like seeing lots of fighting age males being shipped over or something or whatever it is. But yes, it's not quite as strong on that. Brexit vote you can probably work out for yourself. So let's have a look at how it's held up since the last election. And look at that. Tories have just bled away support. So I mean, they've lost a full half of their support from the people who voted for them last time. And some of them are going to Labour, but pretty much they're all going to Reform.
Mm-hmm. So primarily you would say that the vote in the upcoming elections is primarily a non-conservative vote, anti-Tory rather than a pro-Labour.
Let's look at Labour to address that point. They haven't gone anywhere. It's the same. Yes. It's the same vote share. Labour are not getting more popular. The Tories are just hemorrhaging support.
I think that is the lesson from this election, really, is that it's not that Labour are particularly good or particularly resonating with people. It's just that the Tories are monumentally
awful.
Bad. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and I blame David Cameron for this, because I mean he came in and he wanted to modernise the Tory party. And what do we mean by modernise? Basically, is get rid of all the white men who believe in conservatism. Just get rid of them, sideline them, push them out.
He was sort of almost a Blairite. I think it's fair to say he was basically
he admits it himself,
wearing a blue rosette. Right?
Yeah, I mean he called himself the heir to Blair.
He did.
He's very much a Blairite, and all the circle of people, and that was when I was still involved in the party. All the circle of people around him, they loved Tony Blair. They were obsessed with him. They talked about him all the time. It's like, how can we emulate him? How can we become like him? And there was only a few of us sort of involved back then who were saying, by the time of 2010, we were saying, no, this is the time to go back to proper conservatism. They're sick of Labour. This is your moment. And when obviously I was supporting David Davis, but the majority decided to go with David Cameron, and we got this modernisation. So what that meant was parachuting candidates that he wanted into the safest seats, which makes it quite interesting to when you come to what the Tory party is going to look like after the election. So I put this thread up. So there's going to be a number of my threads on here, but they're so good, that's why I needed to share them with you, where I basically just say, look, based on the latest polling that we've had, the polling after Reform came out, Rishi Sunak does get back in, but his majority is slashed from 27,000 to about 2,000.
That's pretty close, isn't it?
Which is well, this is the thing. I mean, I'll show you this, but even if they get 55 seats here, all of them are super marginal. So Rishi Sunak stays in. And Nadeem Zahawi, now he's stepping down, but if he wasn't stepping down, he should win his seat, because he's got one of those nice safe seats. Priti Patel, she'll probably come back in, and she'll be a contender for the Tory leadership coming back in. Suella Braverman, her seat is a bit of a knife edge. Fareham. Fareham is kind of Hampshire's Clacton. So if she had flipped to Reform like I was sort of suggesting that she do, then she'd probably have a much stronger chance. But for whatever reason, she wasn't accepted or wasn't brave enough. Her seat's a knife edge, but she might get back in and be another leadership contender. Who else stays in? Nus Ghani will probably win Sussex World. Ranil Jayawardena. Any help on that?
Jayawardena.
Jayawardena. So
there you go.
Ranil Jayawardena, he'd be in, and he'd have a 4-digit majority in the thousands, so that will give him a nice safe seat.
But the Tories in 2019 were winning by 10,000, 20,000, sometimes even 30,000. These are a couple of thousand. So this is a very, very delicate.
Well, this is my point. If you've got a majority in 4 digits, you're a leadership contender on the other side of this. And the other one I'll highlight here is Sabit Bahati. So that is what the Tory party is going to look like after the election. These are the people who hold their seats. Now let's talk about who's going. Gove. Now he's smart enough to step down before he gets kicked out anyway, but he'll be gone. Globalist Chancellor. What was it? Oh, Jeremy Hunt. He's going to be gone. Oliver Dowden, Deputy Prime Minister.
He was responsible for that online harms bill, which was
good,
absolutely horrendous. It was just enhancing internet censorship.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Labour will do that more, of course, but a subject for another time. Grant Snaps, one of the few that people actually know. He's going to be gone. Penny Mordaunt, Portsmouth North. She can bugger off. Won't get Bill Gates writing a foreword for her next book. I don't know who this guy was, but apparently he's the Lord Chancellor, Alex Chalk. He's gone. Mel Stride from Work and Pensions will be cashing in his own pension early. Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, she's also gone. Now, this is remarkable for me because she stands for Chichester. Chichester, I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's basically distilled middle-class Toryism in a place. If you were to concentrate the juices of middle-class Toryism and then just splash it liberally, Chichester would grow up. I mean, actually, this Ralph Lauren denim shirt is from House of Fraser in Chichester, which I bought when I was 17, 26 years ago, and I had no idea that the shirt was going to outlast conservatism in Chichester.
Well, there we go.
Yeah. Mark Harper, he's going to need his own transport, the Transport Secretary, because he's going to be gone. Esther McVeigh, I kind of like Esther because she pushed back at least a little bit on the lockdown madness.
The Loch Ness Monster, yeah.
Yeah, but she's gone as well. Liz Truss, who is perhaps most famous for briefly being Prime Minister and appearing on Connor's show. She's going to be gone.
In reverse order of importance, yeah.
Yes, quite. And Kemi Badenoch. Now, her seat is a bit of a coin flip, but I think she'll probably win it because she's going to get lots of support from Tory HQ. So she's my favourite for Tory leader after the election. Now, regardless of the rights and wrongs of it, I do think it's worth noting the optics of the Conservative Party primarily being a Southeast Asian heritage party led by a black woman when immigration is the top issue of the day and will continue to be for many years, and it will be across Europe. Now, whether that's right or wrong or not, I'm not passing comment on that. I'm just saying that optically, it might be a bit of an issue for the Tories.
Well, even operating within their own diversity paradigm.
Yes.
They've gone for the diversity of London. That's the diversity that they want Parliament to reflect, which isn't actually the case in pretty much the rest of the UK. Maybe if you live in somewhere like Birmingham or some of the northerly towns that have seen lots of mass immigration, then maybe it's going to start looking like your high street. However, to the rest of the UK, it doesn't look like that.
And the point that I want to make on this is you know who understands this. Go and have a look at Keir Starmer's Twitter feed. And he's got lots of images there, and just scroll down his Twitter feed. And I'm telling you, it's just white British, white British, white British, every picture. Every video is just white British throughout. So he's not overtly saying it, but he understands the mood of the country, and he's shifting in that direction.
Well, you know who's been whispering in his ear to do that, right?
You tell me.
Mr. Anthony B. Lyer, I think it was. Tony Blair.
That's the one. So I think the Tories, they're going to be knocked down to maybe somewhere between 50 to 100 seats, maybe even lower, maybe even 0 seats. But they have an optical issue with the fact that they've been through this modernisation, and the safest seats are now in the hands of people who, like you say, are reflective of London, perhaps not everywhere else.
That would be a massive change. And there's the obvious question of what would happen in the next 5 years, because it seems to me that if we look at it a bit philosophically, what we see now is the failure of the third way. So, for instance, up until the 90s, mid-90s, there was the dilemma between capitalism and communism. And then some people started saying, no, we need to sort of mix them and have the third way. That's why a lot of parties, especially Labour, and then afterwards Cameron, as you said he's the heir to Blair. Yep. And they seem to be enacting the same policies as just, with breaks. So I don't know what Starmer is going to do now. Most probably he's going to accelerate on what we're living.
I believe he will probably get down immigration, because what he's primarily concerned with is control of the public sector, and is getting his tendrils through that, or at least re-accelerating that sort of Blairite agenda. But I think he probably will push back a bit on immigration, because it will get him what he wants elsewhere.
But have you heard him talking about the demographic issue of England as being also cultural and national? Because if he's not, then who is to say that a week or a month after he gets elected, he's going to say, yeah, but we need to fuel the GDP. And the demographic is merely an economic problem. Same way that Jack Schumer
I'm most certainly not advocating for Labour here, and I'm not saying.
I'm just asking. I'm not trying to be.
Yeah. I get your point, but he at least understands the optics of this going into the election. I'll say that much. Okay. In fact, it's so bad for the Tories that I put this out. If you go to the betting markets and you believe that Tories are only going to lose 100 seats, which would be a really bad election in itself, if you believe that, then you can have this 6-bed, 3,800 square foot house for only £9,231. The betting market will give you the odds to turn that into that house. So, Tory boys, if you're listening, you've got an opportunity to get yourself a mini mansion for £9,000 if you actually think that your party's going to do well. Best of luck with that. It's got so bad that I had to write this open letter to Rishi Sunak to try and make the case.
He does know who we are now, because he released a statement about
yes.
our media platform, so obviously he'll be listening.
Yes, hopefully so. But my open letter to Rishi Sunak, for those who are listening, I'll just read that out. In light of the poor record of your government and the multiple unforced serious errors of this campaign, I have placed a bet large enough to secure my wife a new kitchen if you stand down ahead of the election. I now believe it is your duty to do so. So hopefully he will read that and take the appropriate action. Right, so getting to what reform needs to do to win. Now, hopefully you've had a look at the calculator thing that I put up. I don't think it's going to be done in one shot, but this is what it would take for reform to become, for the 0 seats thing to become reality and reform to become the official opposition. This might happen the election afterwards, but it's not actually that far from where we are now. So basically, all it requires is from here for reform to go up 9 points and for the Conservatives to go down 9 points. That's all it takes. And then, and I know it says 2 seats for the Conservatives. Ignore that because both of those don't exist anymore after boundary reviews. But honestly, it's not a big shift from where we are right now to actually get 0 seats for the Conservatives and for reform to be the official opposition. It is that close. So what do I think will actually happen? I mean, I've been having a bit of an argument with Peter Hitchens this week because he bizarrely is going to be the last person in Britain voting Tory, despite the fact he wrote several books on why we need to get rid of them. Now it's possible, and for whatever reason, he's backtracking. But Peter is a good guy. He was a visionary on this stuff before it was possible, and now it is. And I'm hoping to get him on Brokenomics. So mad respect, Mr. Hitchens. But look, basically, my point here is I think you need to look at the elections of 1906, 1910, and 1918. So 1906, the situation is we have a very unpopular Tory government. But it is not the Tories themselves that are unpopular, it is the ruling class as a whole that are unpopular. So what happens is the election of 1906, the Liberals get a massive landslide, but nobody's actually that up for the Liberals. It's just like it is now, where Labour are going to get in kind of by default. So what happens is they get a massive landslide, and of course they're useless because the whole ruling class was useless at that point. The next election, 1910, it's a hung parliament. The election after that, 1918, the Liberals are destroyed and replaced with the Labour Party. You can see a similar thing happening here, where we're going to have a large Labour landslide at this election. You can well imagine the next one as, just a slightly improved version of that polling data that I just put up, a hung parliament in 2029.
Well, it's perfectly feasible that they're going to sort of hemorrhage votes as it goes along, because there's this sort of pendulum swing in British politics whereby the incumbent party tends to do reasonably okay, but they slowly hemorrhage popularity and votes as time goes on. And eventually that's going to bleed over to a party that's going to be there to mop it up, which might be Reform.
If the Tories stay on this trajectory, they're gone in 2 elections. They are an ex-party in 2 elections. They're gone, replaced with Reform. Now, there's going to be a bit of an effort for, obviously, people like us and people watching at home to stop them from going wet, because they will start to tend wet as they go along. But, I think 2 elections, we could have a completely different paradigm. And, at that point, then you can start going after Labour, to get rid of the other part of the Uniparty. So, what I actually think is going to happen is it's going to need to be a double tap. This election puts Conservatives on the ground. The election after that, one to the head, that takes them out. We need to make the next Parliament all about mass immigration being toxic, put that issue to bed for a generation, get people away from that. And then the election after that, we need to make it about how the big state is toxic and destroying everything. And by then, the financial and economic pressures, as I've explained on Brokenomics many times, will be becoming more obvious. And I think really things get interesting when Farage steps down, because he doesn't want to do this too much, because he wants to go and enjoy his house and his talk shows, and, he's good at politics, but he clearly doesn't want to be doing it too long. Things get really interesting when you replace Farage with a millennial, because I've always said you can only upgrade a boomer so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a millennial, You know, if Farage wants to make me PM, go ahead.
Well, I mean, and the message is whoever is that next man, and maybe you're watching right now. This is your job. We need to smash this consensus. We need to move reform to the right, where they're talking about re-immigration. There's lots of stuff we need to do, and if that is you, get on it, get it done. And finally, for everyone else who isn't that man, go and buy The Islander.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see more of what we're doing, what you want to do is pre-order this lovely magazine, Islander. It's on our merch store, which you can find on our website. Make sure to get it because it's a limited run thing. And if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow us on Twitter where we share everything else. Thank you very much for watching and goodbye.